I once considered spending my whole life with this man. What I would have missed.
I don't think you can know. I mean, how many different lives would we be leading if we made different choices? We don't know.
What if there was only one choice? And all the other ones were wrong. And there were signs along the way to pay attention to.
And all the choices would then lead to this very moment. One wrong turn and we wouldn't be sitting here together. Well, that says a lot. It says a lot. I mean, it's probably more than we should be getting into at this late hour.
Hello and welcome to Most Unwanted, an X-Files podcast. I'm your host, Chex, joined by Mr. Luke Costin. How are you doing today, Luke?
Oh, I'm not too bad. I was going to say doctor then, but I'm definitely not a doctor.
You're not a doctor, no.
No, of anything, really.
It is weird that you can become a doctor of, you can become a doctor of anything, can't you, pretty much?
Yeah, but saying that, I mean, I don't know if he's done anything wrong there, so I'm a bit hesitant to bring it up, but Dr. Fox wasn't a doctor of anything, was he? He was just a DJ.
Dr. Fox? I don't know who Dr. Fox is.
He was like a DJ. He was on I'm a Celebrity ages ago. Didn't he do Pop Idol as well?
Oh, I know who you're on about. I can't remember his name, though. It's like full name.
No. I just know him as Dr. Fox. But like I said, I have a feeling that he might have done something wrong, as the entertainers from back in the day tend to have. So I'm not slandering, I don't know.
I mean, you are putting it out there. You're like, that rumor is in the ethos now.
Allegedly. There we go.
Yeah, I feel like if you're a doctor of anything else other than medicine, it feels, I'm not saying this is the case, but it almost feels like arrogant and like self-obsessed to like refer to yourself as a doctor. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, there's probably somebody listening now who's like, this piece of shit, man.
I know there probably
worked
is.
And got my PhD.
This is the thing. I'm not saying that like that is the case. That I'm sure that isn't the case. But the thing is, I feel like that's the way it comes across.
Mm.
You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. If I said, yeah, I'm a doctor, immediately your mind's going to go to medicine, right?
Well, yeah. I mean, that's the first thought. Yeah.
And I said, well, no, I'm a doctor of poetry.
Yeah.
Like, you just don't refer to yourself as doctor. Then I don't know. I don't know what the right and wrong thing is here.
Well, to be fair, imagine if you were on a plane and somebody shouted, "Is there a doctor on board?" Yes.
Yes, sir.
I'm a doctor of literature, and be like, kind of wasting our time. Yeah. So yeah, maybe
to be fair, but he's not lying. Like that is.
He is. Yeah. He's got him on a technicality, but this man has now died of a heart attack. So
you win some, you lose some.
I guess that is true, yeah.
This is an X-Files podcast where we talk about X-Files episodes.
It is.
Shall we get straight into it this week? This week we'll be looking at Season 7, Episode 17 of The X-Files. This one, it was entitled All Things, written and directed by our very own Gillian Anderson.
Yeah. First double credit as well for like, I know David Duchovny wrote an episode, but I don't think he's directed one before. So it's interesting that she's written and directed her first episode.
Yeah. What's fascinating about this is I didn't know that. I only found out that it was Gillian Anderson after I've watched the episode, and when I looked up all the details for it. But you can tell straight off the bat that this is a different way of directing an X-Files episode. It feels very different to anything else like we've seen in the series, really.
Yeah, it's I wrote towards the end that it felt like an experimental episode. There's a lot that's like the way that it presents itself, like with certain different things. I don't want to go into it now, but there's certain things that they keep doing and certain stuff that they explore in it, and just the way that they present it as well. There's just a lot going on, and it feels different. It's definitely a word for it.
Which makes me think that Gillian Anderson got the full just got given the reins and like do what you want to do with this episode.
There's some interesting production notes at the end.
I look forward to that. Originally aired April 9th, 2000. Let's get into it. So immediately, we start off with Scully. This becomes a very Scully-centric episode, which in stark contrast to last week, where it was a Mulder-centric. Okay, so basically, the start of the episode is her getting dressed in front of a mirror, which, I'm not going to lie, after the complaints I've had over the past couple of weeks, I just thought to myself, oh, what's happened to this show?
But she directed it, so this is an artistic choice.
This is definitely an artistic choice. And I'm not saying everything that came before isn't an artistic choice, but I've seen a lot more of Scully getting undressed and dressed over the past couple of weeks than I have in the entire time we've been covering this show.
Yeah, they're ramping it up. They're ramping up the sexual tension on this show. Quite literally in this next scene.
Well, yeah. So and then we see Mulder, and we see Mulder I assume half naked, basically
pretty much,
covered in lying in the bed sheets from which Scully's just got up. An interesting start to the episode.
Yeah, I mean, it's implying that they've slept together, is the implication here.
Well, I mean, they've both been... Yeah, I was going to say, like, they're both in a state of undress.
Mm-hmm. So from the beginning, you think, oh, is this, like, the beginning of what we think is going to be happening anyway? But, yeah, I mean, typical X-Files fashion, they kind of pull the rug from under you in this one. But also we get an early Scully speech. So usually it's Mulder with the speeches. We get Scully with the voiceover with this one.
Time passes in moments. Moments which, rushing past, define the path of a life, just as surely as they lead towards its end. How rarely do we stop to examine that path, to see the reasons why all things happen, to consider whether the path we take in life is our own making, or simply one into which we drift with eyes closed. But what if we could stop, pause to take stock of each precious moment before it passes? Might we then see the endless forks in the road that have shaped a life? And seeing those choices, choose another path.
Yeah, and we also, along with the voiceover for the start, I think we're introduced to a few techniques that we see throughout the episode. Mm-hmm. One of which is time slowing down. Mm-hmm. So throughout this episode, you get moments where it's just a lot of it's just mundane things or just something that happens in Scully's life, but the whole scene just slows down as it happens. And another recurring theme throughout the episode is this clicking sound. Mm-hmm. Well, it's not a clicking sound. Sorry, it's like a TikTok sound. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, there's like knocking and stuff like that. Which when you find out like more of the themes later on, it starts to come together a bit. But yeah, initially it's just like this persistent like knocking or tapping.
I feel like you can like it's all tapping, but you can almost with the time slowing down as well. I think you can pretty quickly figure out that it's like seconds passing. You know what I mean? And that's what it's and everything that. It's throughout everything as well. Like even when it's not quite clear that it's purposeful, there's something in the background that's just sort of basically being a metronome to the scene.
Basically, yeah. I did remind me a bit of Spaced. I'm not going to lie. With is it Tyres, the Raver, where he just starts getting into that's if you've never seen Spaced, just search for Space Tyres, and there's scenes where he'll just get zoned into like sounds around him and turn into like a rave. I was expecting that.
And that's basically what Scully's doing. Except she's not enjoying it.
Yeah, it's driving her mad.
It looks like it's not a comfortable experience. We have a flashback to sort of figure out how they got to this state. And we start off with a fairly regular X-Files introduction, where Mulder, and again, we get that tick-tock again of the projector being turned on and off as the slides go through. And basically, Mulder talks about a new investigation he wants to go for with regards to crop circles.
Yeah.
He's seen all these different crop circles appear up, and he talks about how crop circles in England are becoming more and more advanced, they're becoming more and more intricate, which suggests, obviously, a supernatural element to it, and not just like a prank. And as he's saying all this, Scully is switched off completely.
Mm-hmm.
She's not interested, to the point where Mulder even says he's not got any pants on, and Scully doesn't bat an eyelid at this.
Yeah. It's that typical when your mind is just elsewhere, or he's just not there at all, and it's just everything's just washing over you.
Mulder suggests that they go to England to decide to figure out this algorithm that a community that he's been made aware of is figuring out. And so the idea being they've taken all of these crop circles appearing and been able to figure out an algorithm, and so much so that they can almost predict where the next one will appear and what it will be and why it'll be in this particular place.
Yeah.
So obviously this piques Mulder's interest. It's also an interesting analogy for the episode as a whole as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like this sort of idea, like this, again, running themes all the way through this episode of like chaos versus like destiny versus things that should happen and things that just you've got to let happen.
Yeah.
That's constant throughout this episode, especially through Scully.
And this, I'll say it now because I wrote it down later, and I'll get the klaxon ready. It reminded me a lot of like, because it was talking about fate versus choice, and what is really at force. That's a driving theme in Lost, like all the way through. So with that as one of the themes, I couldn't shake this feeling that this felt very Lost flashback episode. You know what I mean?
I'm so glad you said that, because the whole episode very much reminded me of an episode entitled The Constant, which is arguably one of the best episodes of television ever, in my opinion. And very reminiscent of that. Obviously, with The Constant in Lost, there's a lot of deals with like flashbacks constantly switching back and forth, which we don't get in this episode. But the idea of letting yourself go and letting yourself become, rather than working against the world, letting the world almost take you. There's a lot of
what
happens.
Happens. Just that kind of thing. Well, also we had Moby at the beginning of this episode, the first of many appearances of not Moby himself, but the music of Moby.
We did, yes, yeah. Again, very different feel, and I did notice that as I was watching it. There was like, is this just like a song in the beginning? Like, it just felt weird. This wasn't X-Files. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, a lot of Moby in this series as well. Is he got an album out? Working on that. Just a little tidbit. When I was making the notes, I copied the production notes, and there was a picture of Moby. And I don't know if it's the notes app that I'm using or if it's just what happens with the internet now. If you copy a picture and paste it as text, it gives a description of what's in the picture, and it just it said for Moby, bald man staring at camera intently. So, that was my description. It did it with Gillian Anderson as well, and it just said a redheaded woman smiling at the camera. So there you go.
That's a lot nicer than bald man staring intently. Now, basically, Mulder decides. Well, they have a little bit of an argument, and Scully basically tells Mulder that she's sick of running. Is the general theme of it. She basically says she's so sick of looking to find the next big mystery like Mulder is. Like, she just wants to sit still. She wants to have a bath on a Saturday. And Mulder, she says, why doesn't Mulder want that? And Mulder says, well, he'd be scared of what he was not figuring out. He'd be scared that he was missing out on something. I thought this was an interesting dynamic between the two, though, because when Scully wasn't paying attention, I felt Mulder was genuinely hurt by this.
Well, I mean, I think everyone can relate to that kind of feeling of when you're explaining something to somebody with enthusiasm.
And you're excited about it.
Yeah, and they're just not that interested, and it's like, oh, because it sort of knocks your excitement down, because you're just like, oh, nobody's excited as I am.
And you definitely get that feeling from Mulder, and like there is almost, dare I say, a contempt from Scully, which I have a bit of an issue with this in this episode, because this is an interesting episode for what they do to Scully's character. I do feel like it all comes a little bit out of left field.
I know what you mean, yeah. I mean, what we find out later on, that Scully's got a much, I hate to say darker. It's not darker past as in, like, you know, she's not killed somebody or anything.
Yeah.
But
there's just a lot of stuff that we don't know about.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like from the image that we've had of Scully so far, this seems out of nowhere. But
it's not just that. Like, we've not seen her like completely fed up and like not knowing where to go. Like, she seems happy at the X-Files this season, and then out of complete nowhere, it's just like because we've seen this before. Back when she was like wasn't sure whether the X-Files was progressing her career or not.
Yeah,
but like that's not been an issue in the last like season or so. You know what I mean? So like, if to then somehow have to get into the mindset of like, oh yeah, Scully's fed up here. It just felt a little. I don't know. It felt a little bit out of nowhere for me personally.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have as much issue with the fed up part of it. I don't know. The way I sort of rationalized it was that she is constantly having these conversations with Mulder, and I guess everybody like has a bad day, and this is a particularly bad day for her.
And this is work as well, so you know everyone's entitled to be fed up at work.
Yeah, but I can understand where you're coming from, because it does feel, like it's just appeared basically.
I think this was a story that I'm just going to guess Gillian Anderson has wanted to tell for a while. And I think the problem I have with it, and again, it's not that big a problem, but it doesn't feel earned. So it feels like we'll just tell this story, even though there's been no groundwork put into it to sort of get to this stage with the characters. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's sort of the little in the back of my mind as I'm watching it.
If this was an episode that was like 2 or 3 series ago, maybe it would have worked more. Maybe?
Yeah, I think it would have worked better. I really do.
Yeah.
Also, I'm generally pissed off because Scully not being interested robbed us of an England episode, which especially when you forgive. That's something I can't forgive.
Especially when you see Mulder's cap at the end. He must have had a rocking adventure in pardon the pun, in Stonehenge.
I missed the cap.
Yeah, right at the end. Like I mean,
remember him wearing it, but I don't remember anything about it.
Just says Stonehenge rocks. Which I would love that cap. I think if I ever see that, I'm definitely buying one.
So yeah, while we get caught up in the details a little bit, Scully decides to stay while Mulder goes to investigate in England, and all the while through, Mulder's calling her, telling her like all these details of what he's going to do, and Scully's just not interested in the slightest.
Yeah.
Mulder's still asking her to do things whilst she's staying in America, and she kind of begrudgingly agrees if she has time. One of the things he asks her to do, should I say, is there is a member of this, I don't know whether this is like society or something, but like the people who are like figuring out the patterns with the crop circles and whatnot. They've got someone in America that has files that they want to give to Mulder, but they won't email them over because they're too confidential. So he's asked Scully to go pick them up. So yeah, that's in the back of Scully's mind. She's going off to do things. Do we find out why she goes to the hospital? I can't remember.
There's a
it's
case
just to pick up an autopsy report.
Yeah, there's a case they're already working on, and there's an autopsy report she needs to pick up.
Which she does. Again, time slowing down as she's talking to the receptionist and whatnot. And then, lo and behold, she opens up the case, and it's not the one that she was after. But through a miraculous coincidence, she actually knows the person that the mixed-up report that she's received. And when she asks about him, she gets shown to the room of bear with me, I forgot the name now.
Is it
Daniel Waterson.
Yeah, Waterson. That's it. Yeah.
So immediately we know she's got ties to this guy.
Mm-hmm.
What did you clock this straight away?
See, I thought it was going to be a romantic thing. Then I saw the guy and I was like, oh no, it's probably not that. Then we find out it is a romantic thing, and it's like, oh, okay, I didn't expect this.
Yeah, it does feel like there's a bit of an age gap here, and we also know that he was her professor as well. We find out in this next scene that like she studied under him. Yeah,
which again is a big no-no. Even despite age, like you're not meant to go out with your students like at all. So again, it's this whole like new side to Scully that we've not seen, where she has like, again, I want to say a dark past. It's not dark as in like she's not done anything legally wrong or anything.
Yes,
but there's still like something's not right about it. If you know what I mean.
Well, we don't get the full details either, do we?
Yeah,
because it's kind of like it's never like explicitly said. It definitely, but the vibe of it felt like maybe it was an affair. Do you know what I mean?
That's what I got from it.
Yeah, because he's got a daughter, and that might just be from a previous marriage, and like, but the daughter's very resentful of the whole situation.
They said that he got divorced as well afterwards, so it's kind of implied that there was some kind of affair angle, and that's ruined things. But yeah.
So and this is something that we'd never heard anything about from Scully. But yeah, this guy is very, very ill. He's got a heart condition, and naturally, as he's Scully's tutor in the field, he's been giving them medical advice to the doctors as to what to do, and more often than not, getting it right. And they have like this moment in the hospital where also you've got the daughter, as I say, the daughter's here as well, who immediately, because we don't find out this affair straight away, and so all we've really got to go on is the daughter just not really liking Scully for whatever reason.
Basically. For a second, I honestly thought the daughter was Maggie Gyllenhaal. Like, she looks so much like her, and I was like, and being called Maggie probably didn't help. And I was like,
yeah.
I thought, oh god, is this like her like first role or something? And then no, it was just somebody else who's like a character actor.
Somebody else.
It's not Maggie Gyllenhaal. Sorry.
There's the scene between Scully and Daniel there. It's quite, again, we really get to see Gillian Anderson's acting chops for one.
Yeah.
And there is like this sort of moment between them of like, it's the hand touch here, like ever so, like, you know, they're obviously very familiar with one another.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of talk between the pair about whether they did the right thing, sort of leaving each other, like what could have been in the past. Once again, another theme throughout the episode, and I feel like this episode does this really well, of going through and tying all these themes together of like, well, are they here now because of choices they made, or was this always the way it was supposed to go?
Yeah, exactly. Again, it's that kind of like, fate v choice, like bringing it back up again. And throughout the episode, they constantly are referencing this. And also referencing how Scully has changed as a person as well. And then by the end, you get the ultimate... we'll save it till when we get to that part. But there's a lot on talking on how people change as well.
Problem is, I was going to say, I feel like we're sticking to the details too much, but this episode kind of is all detail.
There's not a lot that actually happens.
No, but it's all in the moment, isn't it? And it's all like the different sort of like themes reoccurring as they do, and like they happens a lot. So we get another one here where as Scully's going to sort of go to this contact that Mulder's told her about, Scully has one of those moments where time slows down again, and she almost hits a woman crossing the road.
Yeah. I mean, I would argue being on her phone probably didn't help.
This is 2000, Luke. It's a different time.
You can drive. I suppose it's automatic. I guess you don't need your hand for the gear stick. Still, that doesn't seem like a good excuse.
No, you really shouldn't. It's 2022, people. Get off your phones. Like, let's not talk on your phones as you're driving. But yeah, she does almost hit and probably kill this person if she had have hit her. But she manages to avoid it just. And this woman, this was a weird one because I was sure I was supposed to recognize this woman because, like, they have a shot of this woman turning around and smiling at Scully.
Yeah.
And I was like, what have I missed? Like, where's this come from? And it's not. It's foreshadowing something later in the episode.
Yeah, pretty much. I quite like this recurring theme of this this woman that you see as well in the jacket. This felt a lot like a psychological horror or like a gothic horror. Do you know where like there's a ghost haunting someone and they're like going crazy because they keep seeing these things? It kind of played like that she kept seeing this thing and chasing it. Have you ever seen what's it called? Don't Look Now, where there's this kid in the red Mac and he keeps seeing her everywhere and chasing her.
Yes,
around.
Yeah.
It kind of reminded me of that. Like, yeah, this psychological horror element to it. Obviously, it's not played like that at all, but that's the vibe that I got when she kept seeing this thing because she kept like chasing it down.
No, there's definitely a horror aspect to it. I thought of a bit of Final Destination as well.
Yeah.
With obviously, if she hadn't have broke for this woman, there's a truck that goes past that probably would have hit her car.
Yeah, true.
And again, it brings up that debate of how much of life is in your own hands and how much of like destiny is foreshadowed already. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I think there's definitely that sort of feel to it, and like all the slowing down of time and like the ticking in your ears. That's a horror trope as well. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there's times where the ticking slows down and goes to such a beat, such a tempo that it almost sounds like a heartbeat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
which I don't think it's a coincidence that Daniel's suffering from cardiac problems. You know what I mean?
Well, yeah. I hadn't thought about that actually, but yeah, the beating of it, yeah, is definitely reminiscent of a heartbeat. Yeah, so I guess they're sort of talking about that as well.
Yeah, exactly. And anyway, we'll move on. She finally does go to see this contact. Who I forgot the name of the contact, to be honest. I'll find that out in a little bit.
Oh god, yeah, what was her name? I can't even remember.
I'm not even sure whether you ever get told. You might do. I can't. remember.
It's something Azar. Because I wrote down a note about her, what she says about the car.
Yes,
accident.
You're right. It was
something Colleen Azar. That's it. Yeah.
And Scully. Scully knocks on the door and she recognises her straight off the bat, and she actually accidentally walked into a room that she was in the hospital, which again, another coincidence. We're seeing a lot of coincidences throughout this episode with like the mixed up medical reports, and now this, the woman walking out in front of Scully instead of her getting hit. I keep on saying it, but this is the problem, right? This is the problem I've got at the moment. I feel like I'm just constantly saying recurring themes and, look out for this. But this episode constantly says it as well. Like, it doesn't give you a moment without jamming it into your face. Look at this theme.
It definitely, it really hammers home its theme throughout.
Which makes me sound like I'm just like, I've got nothing else to say. But it's not, I've got to tell you what's in the episode. I've got to.
The irony of keeping saying recurring themes over and over again.
The recurring theme of this podcast is recurring themes.
Well, at least I know what to put in the episode description.
I'm listening to myself talk and I'm like, God, you're not going to go saying recurring themes again, are you? But that's what it is. That's the episode.
It was repeating. What's another word for
What's
themes?
another word for themes? Hang on.
Repeating.
Don't you worry about this. I'm going to get a thesaurus up.
We'll just keep coming up with different words for it.
Yeah. Edit this out, Luke. They don't need to know about our tricks. Right, hang on. Thesaurus.com, themes. So yeah, we see another repeating essence.
That works, kind of.
And another example of this multiple chapters is...
well, at least we're not saying the same thing.
Oh, God. So Scully and Colleen have a conversation, and immediately, I mean, Scully basically says, I don't really know what's going on. Mulder's just asked me to pick this thing up. And immediately Colleen kind of seems to work Scully out. Says that she's like, she's going too fast. She needs to slow down. Talks about some of these coincidences that are happening in Scully's life and says maybe they're not coincidences. Maybe this is... So, for example, the idea being when she got into a car, she mentioned she almost got into a car accident. The idea being that car accidents, even though you're saying they're a coincidence, there's usually a reason for the coincidence.
Yeah.
And that could be like lack of attention, for example. Maybe your mind's elsewhere. Maybe you're thinking of something else. And it goes back to this constant capacity. That doesn't even work. I've got to say recurring themes. It goes back to that same theme of one person's coincidence is another person's like reason. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's a reason for it, and you've got to follow it rather than sort of like just write it off. Yeah,
exactly. I did like that Colleen was saying that accidents, car accidents specifically, are to do with people not paying attention. I was like, she's bloody right. That's what she is.
She's on her phone. You're right. You're spot on. Scully kind of takes offense to it as well, which is really funny. I was like, come on.
I mean, yeah.
But yeah, Scully kind of scarpers out of there. In doing so, drops all of her like papers on the floor, and you have one of those slow down moments again. And then after that, again, like you said, there's not really a lot happens in between now and then. You've got Daniel calls Scully to get her back to come back to the hospital with basically to back him up on what he would need in order to save his life.
Yeah, I love this scene because I just thought, man, treating a doctor in a hospital must be an absolute nightmare because that must be constantly second guessing your opinion.
There is a part of this which I was just like, come on. And there was moments in this where Scully just gets free reign to do whatever she wants in the hospital. And like,
yeah, I thought that, yeah.
Spoilers, but Daniel goes into cardiac arrest. Okay, well, I mean, we'll have to just quickly get to it. They have a few more moments, basically. It's a bit too late on, but basically he goes into cardiac arrest later on in the episode, and Scully saves him, and she calls the nurse in, and the nurses just follow her advice. They've got no idea who she is. And then she just, I was just like, whoa, like that would not happen.
Yeah, I thought that she could just be somebody who's watched a lot of ER. You know what I mean?
Oh, you've just murdered a man.
I was just following what you said. You sounded like you knew what you were doing. I thought that was interesting as well, that they just blindly. But then again, what do you go, I'm a doctor? Okay, I guess she could, yeah. She could have just said, I'm a doctor.
But again, I could say that.
Yeah, I mean.
Like, the first thing, if I was in the hospital and someone started flatlining and I was like, don't worry, I've got this, I'm a doctor. The first
doctor of literature.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. The first thing any real doctor would ask me is like, first of all, they'd say, I don't care if you're the doctor, I'm the doctor of this patient, it's my responsibility. Secondly, they would be like, if you want to do it, show me some credentials, prove to me that you know what you're doing. There's no way they just let her go for it.
I think we need to go back to the honours system. Just trust them. What they got to lie about? There's a spike in murders.
So yeah, before any of this happens, I'll just quickly run you up to date with that. There's more conversations between Scully and Daniel about their lives before and what happened. We find out that Daniel basically uprooted his whole life after their relationship ended and followed Scully to Washington, unbeknownst to Scully. And we start to get a bit bigger picture of why the daughter's so resentful, because it does feel like this guy has lived in the shadow of his previous life for the last however long it's been, 10, 15, 20 years.
Yeah, exactly.
And much to like put his daughter to one side as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's basically put his entire family on hold for Scully, and
And even as he's telling her, like, she's almost reprimanding him for it. It's like saying you shouldn't, like, I've given you no indication as to that. That's what I want.
Yeah, and it does seem like he's trying to recreate this thing that they had, whereas Scully has truly moved on, which we definitely see by the end. Like, when she's using pseudoscience really to cure him, to which he's just is completely baffled. Yeah, so it just shows the differences between them now. So they talk a lot about fate again here and stuff like that. I want to ask a big question to you, but we haven't got long. So you got one word answers to this big question.
Okay.
Do you believe in fate or choice? Choice as well. Anyway, let's move on.
Yeah. Speaking of fate and choice, Scully does return to Colleen, who starts to explain to her a little bit more about what she thinks is going on in Scully's life. She mentions the slowdown in time. She mentions this lack of control that Scully feels.
Mm-hmm.
And she says that it might not be... these might not all be coincidences. She mentions something about Buddhism and collective unconscious, about being able to sort of not it's so, for example, with suggest that maybe she already knew Daniel was there. She could sense him basically through like this sort of collective unconscious, and that's how she knew to sort of like look for a certain report and whatnot.
She starts talking about like auras and stuff like that as well. So maybe
and how each person has their own aura, and we're all connected by our auras. And that's what might be occurring with Scully, with like these sort of like little moments that she's having, which Scully is skeptical of, obviously. But she comes round to the idea later on when, like we've said previously, she visits and she kind of makes amends with Daniel. They kind of find this sort of space where they're happy just to sort of like be in the moment with each other, to remember like where they was and where they are now. And in quite a sweet moment where Scully puts her head on his chest, he goes into cardiac arrest, and Scully has to save his life by the end of it.
Yeah. Again, this is where she takes over and no one questions it.
Not before. But she also gets the rage of Daniel's daughter when we find out that 2 minutes after she left, he was put into a coma. So, not great for Scully here, especially when her daughter's already annoyed at her meddling in their life, to then turn up and immediately put... it kind of proves the point, to be honest.
Yeah. It's she's not having the best sort of showing in front of the daughter, but I think the daughter's going to be annoyed with her no matter what she does.
Yeah, it's true. Again, until she's not.
Yeah.
And I thought that for this episode as well, and I was like, okay, we're all cool now. Like,
yeah, she's just fine. Yeah.
Okay, that's like the last 15 years didn't matter. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It does resolve itself pretty quick, but yeah.
So, this is where the episode goes wild, in my opinion.
Yeah.
It's like its own episode, this. Scully's now walking through Chinatown.
Yeah, with Moby in the background. This feels like I put that she's also directed her first music video at the same time.
It's very musical video.
So music video. If this was used in the actual music video, I wouldn't be surprised.
She sees the woman that she almost hit with a car, and proceeds to chase her through the streets. And this woman ends up going into, I believe it's like a Buddhist temple.
Yeah.
I'd imagine.
I think it's a Buddhist temple, yeah.
But once she gets inside, she can't find her anywhere. But Scully doesn't need to find her anymore, because she finds God.
Yes, she does.
Yeah. She finds Buddhist God.
Yeah. It must be a shock for Scully.
Well, that's the thing, isn't it? Because it's wild. Because the thing is, I don't know anywhere near enough about religions to sort of comment on it. Because I know a lot of religions are connected in certain ways.
Now, I from Ari, so I don't know how accurate this is.
This is like 15 years ago.
Yeah, I know Judaism, Christianity, and Islam all have like the same root, like where they come from.
Yes.
I don't think Buddhism's connected to any of the.
No, it surely shatters Scully's faith.
Yeah, she must be having like an absolute religious crisis right now.
She's already found out, like. She's always found out, like, I don't know, is it Genesis, like the first book of the Bible? I think it is. Didn't exist. Like,
from an alien
how
ship.
Scully is still religious is wild. Because she's the only person in the world who can categorically say, no, it didn't happen.
But she did see an angel as well, so, you know.
She did.
Yeah.
And I believe we've had the devil as well, haven't we?
I think so, yeah.
So,
everything's
I don't
covered.
know. I don't
Everything's
know what
covered.
to believe.
Yeah. This. I mean, we've not described what actually happens in this part, but
take it away, Luke. Tell us. I mean, her vision.
So, from memory, she sort of gets sucked into like a white area where she relives clips from her past that zoom past in like this weird. I feel like I've mentioned this before, but anyway, this is what's happening. It's like zooming past, and then we see this shot of the guy. What's his name? Waterson.
Yeah, Daniel.
Just as like this energy being with a dodgy heart,
with a black heart.
Black heart.
You can see all like the sort of like the veins and like the sort of connections in the body.
Yeah, so we see that, and then doesn't it like zoom into his face, and then we get the cut from his face to Scully's face as she sort of awakens again.
Wakens up.
Yeah. I have no idea what happened in that part, but it did look interesting. I was like, oh, that was an interesting jump.
For sure. And Scully doesn't just wake up into her own body. Yeah. Scully wakes up into the body of someone who has completely lost the plot. Who has lost all scientific mind.
Yeah.
And she's gone full spiritual healer.
Yeah.
No, she does basically, she decides that everything scientific that she knows, all of her medical knowledge, isn't working to help Daniel.
Mm-hmm.
And she brings in Colleen and a lot of different alternative treatments to try and treat Daniel. So like a lot of, I don't know the words for it all, but like, is it chakra healing and stuff like that?
Healing his chakras, yeah.
Which I'm not really sure what that means. I know people. This is the problem. I feel like you're going to offend people here. I'm going to offend people. I know people who get something, so they pay for a service where it's this. Okay, and this is what it's described as to me. So it's a second-hand description. Okay, it's like a massage, but they don't touch you. They just wave their hands over you, which gets rid of bad spirits. And apparently, this really works for them. And you know what? I don't believe it myself, but like, if it works for you and you come out feeling better, then it's money well spent. Do you know what I mean? It's like a placebo, I suppose.
If it works for you, then yeah, that's cool. I mean, to be honest, my last experience of chakra was watching Naruto when I was like 14. Like, they shoot fireballs with their chakra, though, so that's pretty cool.
Oh, is that what you can do?
So yeah, there's a lot of things.
Interested?
There's a lot of things you can do with chakra, apparently. But yeah. I mean, I like that we're getting a bit of Mulder in. That sounded wrong. I was going to say that's the end of the episode.
Don't say that.
I'm glad I stopped myself before I finished the sentence.
Me.
What I meant was that it's nice that Scully's taking on sort of Mulder's usual like way of dealing with situations. You know what I mean? Like, they that sort of alternative approach to the sort of scientific approach. So that sort of interesting. We get that, but it does feel that she's changed a lot.
Yeah, and I feel like this is kind of paying off what we've seen from this season of Scully being a lot more open-minded and a lot more open to believing and trying these things. And we've seen that this season. Again, it's just very much like it's the stark change straight off the bat.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. It's a weird one for me, but we're almost at the end of the episode, so we'll just get through that. Despite the Doctor like poo-pooing this idea, saying that it's never going to work, Daniel makes a full recovery, obviously. Yeah. And in the sort of ensuing conversation between him and Scully, he mentions that like he wants to basically be with her, and that's why he suffered through. He mentions the chakra healing and whatnot, and tells her how like ridiculous it is. Mm-hmm. But this is where Scully starts to realize that she's not the same person as she was back then, and whether she believes the choices that she made brought her to this spot, she is at this spot and she's a different person now.
Mm-hmm.
And so she basically says she doesn't want a relationship with Daniel, which he sort of begrudgingly accepts, but also says that you need to put your focus not in me, but in your family around you, in the life that you've got given, whether it was your choice or not. Which I thought was a nice little scene between the two, to be honest. I thought it captured their story and sort of put a nice bookend on it.
Exactly, yeah. It gives you that closure for this story. So it's X-Files is quite good at bringing in elements and neatly wrapping them up by the end of the episode. And I think with this one, we've quite a big element to Scully's backstory that it gets resolved. So yeah.
After all this, Scully is sat on a bench, and she sees the woman who she almost hit with a car again, goes to chase her, but it's just Mulder, who's wearing very similar clothing.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest. When we get to this point, I was like, well, what was the woman? Like, who was the woman? Like, were we meant to know, or?
It's a coincidence. That's basically all it is. It's just a big coincidence. It's a coincidence that Mulder was wearing the same clothes, and also for 2 seconds had a blonde ponytail. It's just a coincidence, Luke.
Yeah. That bit threw me because I was expecting some payoff to who the blonde woman was, but we never get that. As far as I'm aware,
I don't think she's meant to be anybody.
No,
just literally she might not even exist.
Maybe
you could look at it that way of like she was the thing that stopped Scully going into the truck. She was the thing that led Scully to the Buddhist temple. Maybe this is like fate guiding Scully. I mean, you know what I mean? I don't think it's clear exactly what she is.
No. But we do get to see Mulder in this fetching sort of trench coat. So that's always good.
Which again, interesting juxtaposition, because whereas we've seen Scully very out of character, Mulder, which I don't think we've ever seen, was completely wrong about the X-File. He basically turns around and says, he's embarrassed. He's like, you were right. It's nothing. Nothing happened, and I was wrong. I went all the way over to England for nothing.
Basically, nothing happened there, and we don't ever need to go back to England ever again.
Yeah. I was like, no. They go back to Mulder's place and they start having a conversation about about all the recurring themes that we've talked about today.
Think of a new word.
And Mulder basically says that he's not sure whether it's choice or whether it's coincidence or whether it's fate or destiny. And he's not really willing to get into it at this late hour, but he does mention the fact of every choice that they have made has led them to where they are now, and that's what they should be putting their focus on, where they are now. Mm-hmm. But Scully doesn't really hear any of this because she falls asleep, and there is a very sweet moment where Mulder sort of kind of tucks her in. I think he goes for a kiss on the head at one point, but he doesn't quite do it.
I think it's one of those where he probably is like, if she was awake, he might have actually gone in for the kiss. But I
think it's just being close to her.
Yeah,
but Scully gets that sort of you can tell she's in a comfortable place, and she's just sort of she just falls asleep and just lets the day wash over her.
Mm-hmm.
What did you think of this episode? This is a very strange episode to dissect. I've got to be honest.
And just to say that, just to go back to the beginning of the episode, Mulder goes off to bed. So what we were seeing was just Mulder had just
Yes.
gone to sleep. That's all that
just
had
gone
happened.
to sleep,
Nothing
guys.
seedy. Nothing seedy, you perverts. What did I think of this episode? It's a tough one because I'll be honest, I'm not 100% sure if I quite liked it or didn't like it at all.
I'm 100% with you here.
It's yeah, there's a lot of stuff in it where I like, oh, that was interesting. I really like that. And then there's also parts of it where I just think, well, what was that? And why did we do this? And
don't you think it felt messy?
A little bit, yeah. It did feel, again, it felt experimental in the way that you sort of see art films, and they're just like you have to try and piece it together yourself of what it means. There's no like sort of conventional narrative, which I guess that's fine. Like if that's what they're going for, and it is an art kind of episode, fair enough. It just felt really different, and yeah, I can't say I loved it or hated it. But I also don't think it's an in the middle episode either. You know what I mean? It's weird. It's a difficult one to score, to be honest. Really difficult.
Absolutely, I'm completely on board with you. I thought I loved some of the ideas they were going for.
Yeah.
I don't think. Again, I said this earlier in the episode. I don't think it was earned. I think there's a lot of what Scully does, which I'm like, this isn't the Scully that we've seen in the 10 episodes leading up to this. And so it feels like taking it back, but then it just seems like such a huge leap towards the end of the episode as well. But that's not so much what bothers me. I can kind of buy that. That's not a problem for me. I think it's just the execution of it all. It just all does feel like everything's there to tell this story rather than the story being the most important thing. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, 100%.
Like it's not doing what the characters wouldn't naturally do or what makes sense for the characters of the story. It's what makes sense for this particular plot, and that feels a little bit messy to me, and it feels a little bit. I think the idea and the plot itself is really, really interesting, and I did enjoy it. I just don't think they quite got the execution right, which is a shame, because what I will say is another powerhouse performance from Gillian Anderson.
Oh,
like,
definitely.
The moments between her and Daniel, like, it's phenomenal acting. But why do we care? Because we've only found out about this guy 5 minutes ago, and you've never mentioned him before. You know what I mean? It's like, it's just very convenient. I don't know. It's a weird one.
It's one of those where if, let's say as a throwaway line in season 2, she mentioned having a relationship with somebody, with a tutor, or even like keeping the details really light, just saying, oh, I had a relationship or whatever, and it's just a throwaway line, you don't ever come back to it, and then they bring it up here, you go, oh, that's the... Yes. I mean, maybe they did. We've completely missed it.
I don't think so, though.
But I don't think so, yeah. But if they'd done that, it's that kind of, oh, they mentioned this, and they've whether they were ever going to pay it off at all or not, like, at least it's tied it back to something. Whereas, yeah, this just feels invented. It's kind of like... this is a weird analogy, but this is the only one that pops to my mind, is in The Simpsons. They make a new character. They make a new character for Itchy and Scratchy, and he literally just appears, and everyone hates him because he just appears. And it's and it's kind of like that. It's just like, where did he come from? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, what was? Yeah, I don't know. It's yeah.
He's there for this story.
Literally is, and then I don't imagine we'll ever see him or hear about him again. Sure. So yeah, it's a strange one. Yeah, I really am sort of conflicted over this.
Same, and my biggest disappointment before we get into the production notes is that the way this episode is shot has made me recap it by trying to, how do you recap a bunch of slowed down scenes with TikToks in the background? Like, it's just, how do you do it? How do you do it?
Yeah, it's tough, but that's what we do.
It's what we do.
We do the tough stuff.
Speaking of tough stuff.
Luke's production notes.
Sometime during the 6th season of The X-Files, Anderson approached series creator Chris Carter and asked to write an episode that explored her own interests in Buddhism and the power of spiritual healing. Ultimately, she wanted to write a script in which Scully pursued a deeply personal X-File, one in which she is taken down a spiritual path. There's a lot of S words there. When logic fails her. She wrote the basic outline of what became All Things in one sitting, which Carter approved due to the personal and quiet nature of the story. So,
and the thing is, I don't want to criticize, because it's a good story to tell. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I don't know. I feel very conflicted. I really do.
Yeah. Anderson's first draft of All Things was 15 pages too long, and it did not feature a concluding fourth act. Carter and executive producer Frank Spotnitz thus began to work with Anderson to finish the episode, although Carter and Spotnitz later acknowledged that the majority of the script was all Gillian. So, when they say fourth act, do they mean the wrapping up where she starts doing the
finale,
the finale? What would it have been before then if it didn't have the fourth act? She just sees God and then ends.
Now there's a bold choice.
That's an ending. That's like a Sopranos ending. Despite her satisfaction with the final version, Anderson regretted a handful of the necessary script changes. This one, actually, I saw this one and I thought, was it that one? No, the next part. There's one that I read, and as soon as I read it, you'll be like, that would have made more sense. But we'll come to that anyway. Most notably, the addition that Scully and Waterson's affair was intimate. In the original script, the two came close to having an affair, but Scully ended the relationship when she discovered that Waterson was married. So yeah, in her version, there was no actual relationship.
Interesting.
In the commentary for the episode, Anderson elaborated on Scully and Waterson's original backstory. After Scully and Waterson came close to having an affair, Scully left to study at Quantico to become an FBI agent. After she left, Waterson became depressed and his family began to suspect an affair. The emotional turmoil was too much for Waterson's wife, who killed herself, which made Waterson's daughter Maggie resent Scully, as shown in the finished episode. Anderson believed that the removal of this backstory made it hard for the audience to understand Maggie's disgust with Scully.
I mean, yeah. It
would have made more sense.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. When I read that, I was like, yeah, well, why did they take that in? Even if they said, no, it has to be an actual relationship, that could have still prompted the backstory. It still would have worked. So I don't understand why they took that out. Unless it was one of those things where it was like, we don't want that in the episode because
and it might just be trying to cut for time as well because they had a lot to fit in.
But yeah, possibly. When Anderson first wrote the episode, she did not imply that Scully and Mulder had sex. Spotnitz and the production crew, however, felt it was natural to suggest that Scully and Mulder's relationship had evolved into a romantic one. So again, it feels like they're just trying to. Gillian Anderson's just trying to tell her this story about like Buddhists and stuff.
It's made me think I'd like to see a version of this episode that was without all the changes.
Do you know how there's like a trend at the moment of they do comic book versions of like the original script for stuff? So like there was the original script to Star Wars as a comic. There was the original script to I think it was Alien 3 because that was like a whole mess. Yeah. They turn these original scripts and put them into comic books because it's the cheapest way to just it's storyboarding essentially.
Yes,
yeah. I wonder if they ever have ever planned that or if there's any interest in that because I think that'd be interesting, to see what the original version. But then again, it's not as big and high profile as like Star Wars, I suppose, the original Star Wars. So I don't know if it would ever get there.
Yeah, I feel like it's a difficult story to tell in a comic book format. So.
on its own, yeah.
Yeah. How are you going to show time slowing down?
Somebody will try. The idea of heart chakra crop circles was included because Anderson wanted whatever Mulder was involved in that took him away from Washington to somehow tie into what I was going through, the journey that I was going through. This is a quote, by the way. I'm not just repeating myself.
Yeah.
As such, Anderson dedicated much of her time researching both crop circles and heart chakras, but she later gave additional credit to Spotnitz, who aided her in the research. So there you go. There's that seemed like a throwaway subplot to me, but apparently even that's tied in. So
yeah. And again, that's what I'm saying. The ideas are all there. It's got everything it's got all the ingredients for a great episode, and it just didn't quite mix together well for me.
Around the same time she approached Carter about writing an episode, Anderson was being solicited by television networks who were interested in having her direct TV shows. She, however, had never directed before and decided she would first helm an episode of The X-Files. You got practice first. I'll practice on the thing that everybody knows me for. Practice on I would first helm an episode of The X-Files before working on other series. Consequently, when Anderson pitched her initial script idea, she also expressed her desire to direct the episode. Carter accepted the story, but did not appoint her as director until the revisions and rewrites. Anderson worked with series director Kim Manners. There's a lot of production notes in it, just like will blur into one. Director Kim Manners for the majority of the episode, and he assigned Anderson directing exercises, such as making a list of shots for every scene to get her familiar with the demands of directing. I'd love to do a directing exercises. That would be fun, wouldn't it? Learn.
It's quite interesting, because a lot of you often on like these sort of flagship shows, you do find like the cast getting involved with producing and with directing, and it is often like future planning almost. It's like, I want to get more involved with this in the future, and so this is important to me, and because obviously the show can't work without them, like what they're going to do. But I actually had a look at the IMDb just to see whether she went on to direct anything else, and she didn't.
Really? She's never directed anything?
She's directed one episode of The X-Files and a short called The Departure, which stars herself as well.
Not heard of it.
But yeah, like that's all she's ever directed, which is a shame.
Interesting. The episode also marked the first time that a woman had helmed the direction of The X-Files. So yeah, we've not had a woman director before.
Wow.
So yeah.
Yeah, I hadn't even thought about that. But
yeah. It literally took it to be the main star of the episode, like going, come on, let me have an episode.
And even then it was like, well, we'll see. And at the last minute, okay, I suppose.
Anderson's directing helped energize the production. The crew worked harder than usual to ensure that everything was in order for her. Production designer Corey Kaplan went out of his way to find a Buddhist temple at Anderson's request. So there we go. It's an actual Buddhist temple.
Interesting.
The meditation scene required clips from previous episodes. I like this one because imagine it with this. That's all I'm going to say. Like, try and picture this as I say it. Required clips from previous episodes to appear in flashback. Initially, Paul Rabwin and the special effects crew arranged the necessary scenes and placed them in animated bubbles. However, what, just like floating up, like
amazing.
However, the crew was unhappy with the bubbles effect and felt they were too hokey, so they adopted for the slit scan effect. And I'll just quickly summarize to do this sequence with him, his body where we sort of see his heart.
Yeah,
and everything.
the heart.
Nicholas Sirova, who played Waterson, had to lie naked on a platform surrounded by blue screens. A sphere on his chest was matched via motion control as a marker for the beating heart. It was crafted and filmed separately, and then the shots were combined. So yeah, the man was actually in the nuddy for this one.
Oh,
so,
there you go.
Suffer
sacrifices
for your
he makes for, yeah, there you go. I was just going to say the same thing.
And there's some stuff about music, but to be honest, the one that is of note is she worked with Mark Snow producing music for this, or like she wanted specific music and compositions, but it also led to them creating something called Scully's theme, which would not be shown until season 8. So we've got a while to wait for Scully's theme.
Oh, I'm looking forward to that.
So, there we go. I've cut a few out there because there's quite a lot, and to be honest, it was one of those where it's like I don't think you need to know about who was cast and stuff like that. We'll leave all that. So yeah, Critic Files.
It stinks.
Welcome to the Critic Files.
This is the bit I'm least looking forward to.
What?
How do you judge this? I'm gonna say 7, maybe 6. I genuinely, like, I've never been more confused as to what I think about an episode, and this episode just really weirded me out. I'm gonna say 6.5. Let's go down straight down the middle.
6.5. I changed my score 3 times when I was coming up with this. I literally at one point I gave it an 8, and I was like, "Nah, that's too much." Like I was trying to think of what else I've given an 8, and I was like, "No, I don't think it was as good as that." And then I dropped it down to a 6, and I was like, "That's too low." Like that's I feel like that's too harsh on it. I ended up going for a 7 in the end. I feel like that's fair, but also. Again, I'm not even confident on that.
I'm very interested in seeing what the public response was.
Yeah. Well, I mean, from IMDb alone, and we can only work off that sample set of 3,318 people, this has a 7.1, which is really low, actually, for like the sort of episodes that we've seen. Like, bear in mind, I think first-person shooter, which was the most like mixed one that we've had so far, is a 6.2. So it's only like
0.9 above it.
0.9 more. That's an interesting sort of score for this. I think 7.1.
But again, I can see it makes sense. It makes sense to me. That does.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can understand that. If that was sort of like the average across people's reviews, so.
I'm very interested to hearing what our listeners think about this one. Try and help us make sense of this. Maybe I think sometimes, when you after the fact, when like, do you ever get out of a film and you get like straight onto like IMDb and you're just like reading what other people think about it, and sometimes it helps you concentrate and like figure out what you think.
Yeah,
that's what I want. That's what I want from everyone listening at the moment. I need your help to figure out what I think of this episode. So tweeted most unwanted pod on Twitter. Let us know what you thought.
If Twitter's still around, but
if Twitter's still around, yeah. We have sent our $8 check, so we hope to be verified before the week's out.
yeah. It's. I mean, the less said about that, the better. We might have to look at alternatives, but for now, let's use Twitter.
If our Twitter's taken down before then, so as I say, at Most Unwanted Pod on Twitter. If we're not there and you can't find us, just send a pigeon, and we'll receive the pigeon correspondence.
I mean, it's the only way to do it anymore.
Exactly.
The old ways are the best ways.
They're both birds. It's both same thing.
They are the same, yeah.
But thank you so much for joining me for this episode, Luke. What episode are we covering next week?
Next week, we are tackling Brand X.
Brand X, yeah. I very much look forward to discussing that with you. Until then, we shall see you next week. Goodbye.
Why did I drop my pencil right as we're ending?